presentation for those that are in Zoom. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our speaker, who is coming from us today from Jacksonville. She has been, for almost 5 years now, the executive director of Elisha's Retreat. Cheryl Torres, I forgot to introduce your name, sorry. Okay. Graduated with a bachelor's in psychology from Rockhurst University in Kansas City, Missouri. And after graduating, she worked with adults with mental health issues in Washington State. Next, moved on to CASA des Esperanza as a foster parent and intake for home for children that were picked up by CPS in Houston. Then she rose through the ranks there to become an adoption coordinator and helped families navigate the twists and turns going from foster parent to adoptive parent. Then she served as a director of religious education at a Cathedral of the Sacred Heart in downtown Houston. Cheryl has 5 beautiful children, 4 boys and 1 girl, and has a passion for helping people, especially children and families, which she pursued in various ways throughout her life. So we're so excited to have you, Cheryl.
Thank you, Jared.
Let you take it from here.
Thank you, Jared, for inviting me up today. I appreciate it. And I just really want to say thank you guys to all of you for taking the time to be a voice and an advocate for these amazing kids. You know, when I used to work as a caseworker, we would rely heavily on our CASA advocates to really give a voice to the kids. And that's what you guys are able to do. And it makes such a big difference. So thank you for taking the time to care about these kids and speak for them and get to know them and know what's going on with them and how you can best help. So thank you. It's an invaluable service, which you guys really do. So thank you. But yeah, so my background, you guys kind of cover a lot of what my heart is all about, what my passions are. And one of the things that we used to really talk about a lot as a foster mom or as a caseworker, or especially with an adoption, all of the above, is about attachment. So we're going to talk today about attachment. And then the other thing that I now work in is with autism as well, and how attachment is difficult with autism and what is autism and all of that. So that's kind of the scope of what we're talking about today. But I really do love feedback and I love questions. So at any point in time, if I say something or I'm talking too fast, I want you to let me know, okay? And ask your questions, because I love questions, okay? I also have a question answer at the end, so please chime in and let me know what your questions are, how I could best help serve any one of your kiddos, okay? But like I said before, my background is in, or like Jared had said, my background is in psychology. And as a foster mom, I started to learn how these kids are really struggling with attachment. And that one of the greatest gifts that we can give any of these children is the idea that they're loved unconditionally, right? So attachment itself is defined as a relationship bond between a child and a young person and their primary caregiver. This bond is formed, usually in the early years, but it has a really long-term impact on a child's sense of self, their development, growth, and future relationships with others, right? And so I'm sure you guys have been doing trainings over the years on attachment. But the idea is, to kind of simplify it a bit, is that it's really a matter that any person, cannot look beyond their own head or get out of their own thought processes and care about another person without sometimes feeling that somebody cared about them. Okay? And so it boils down to that. So if these kids coming into foster care, coming into the point that they're working with you, they have lost everyone that they knew and loved. No matter how good or bad that relationship was, that was their circle of influence. So to get to where they are in your hearts and hands, and you're their voice, they have lost everyone, right? So they have a broken attachment cycle already, right? Maybe they came into foster care at a situation where they still never felt like anybody loved them, okay? And that happens. We know that, and sometimes that's why they're there. But it was still their safety net, whatever that looked like, okay? So we're working with individuals, and that's even babies, right? So a newborn baby can truly identify who their mom is. They know their voice starting at the 3rd trimester and the voices of the people who are around them consistently. They're able to recognize that. So even a newborn baby is still suffering from that loss of attachment to their mom, even in utero. Okay. And the reason that I like focusing so much on attachment is, we are all, humanity is built to be in communion with one another, to have that community, right? We all kind of realized that a little bit in COVID when we were also isolated. There was a deprivation of that, fair? But when I was a foster mom, I had this baby who was 3 months old who came into care. And it was a failure to thrive baby. I don't know if you've ever experienced that or not, but it was a baby, not failure to thrive because of any medical condition. It was very healthy, but it had spent the first 3 months of its life without anybody holding it. Now its diapers were changed. It received bottles, but nobody was making eye contact and nobody was holding that baby. And so that baby stopped crying. Okay, that baby chose to wither and stop eating and was trying to die because of the lack of anybody in its world caring. That's how strong in humanity attachment is to us. We need people around us, and we need people who care about us no matter what, right? That's an innate human thing. And so innate, so strong that a newborn baby with nothing else wrong with it would choose to wither and die versus living without them. That's strong. Fair? So this is an important component to what you guys are dealing with these kids, is that they need somebody to care about them, to say that they matter, no matter how ugly, no matter how great, no matter what color, what disability, no matter what, but they matter to someone. Okay. Now, the thing that you guys can give them is, hi, welcome, by the way. Anyone else joining on Zoom? Hi, I'm Cheryl Torres. Give you a little bit of a history here. I was a foster mom, then became a caseworker, eventually adoption coordinator, things like that. Now I'm the executive director of Elijah's Retreat, which is a retreat center for families facing autism. So today we're talking about attachment, and then we're talking about autism, and then kind of how attachment and autism relate in our struggle. Okay. But talking about attachment, it's such a vital thing. And so, and we were talking about how kids who are in care and foster care have already lost everybody they know and love to get to the situation where they're at today. And some of them have never had anybody that they really felt truly loved them. Okay. And so you guys, just as CASA advocates, can show them that they matter by showing up, by spending time with them, by being that voice for them, by being there. And just that in and of itself can totally change the trajectory of their life. Because when we've all felt loved unconditionally, we gravitate to that. Because we're so thirsty. It's a need. It's an innate human need. And so we gravitate to it. But if we've never experienced it from anybody throughout our entire life, we can't get out of our own head. We're so self-focused because it's survival. Okay. And when we're all in life or fight or flight, right? We're all afraid there's a bear coming. Yeah, sure. Hopefully we're thinking about the other people around us, but let's just be honest here. We're surviving, right? And so a lot of these kids that are coming into care are in that fight or flight. They're just trying to survive, or they wouldn't be in foster care. Let's be honest, right? And so, in those moments of fight or flight, which typically for these kids isn't just a moment of like 30 minutes or an hour or a bear attack. This is their day in and day out. And they just live in that constant state of fear and anxiety. And it's really hard to attach and feel safe and feel secure from another person when you're looking for the next threat, right? So the first caveat to attachment has to be safety, right? Has to be feeling secure. And that unfortunately takes time, because it took time to get them to the point that they relived day to day in fight or flight, right? But beyond, and so that's them getting into a safe foster home. That's getting them hopefully into a stable foster home for a period of time where they're not moving around as best as can be. But that matters. Having that safety place matters, taking the stress away. But then from there, it's just really showing them that people do care. So if nothing else that you can do for these kids, if you speak and you voice your concerns and you say nobody hears you and nothing changes in the court case, know that you just loving them can make a huge difference for the rest of their life, because they're going to gravitate to that kind of a relationship because they felt it, because they recognized it from you. So know that at the very least, you're making a huge difference just loving them. Okay. And then being in foster homes, maybe going back home, or they're going on to adoptive home. The biggest thing that we can give these kids is that stability of safety, but also knowing that they are loved. No matter where they go, no matter what happens in life, they matter to you, because they still do, right? Your own cases, you've been here 23 years. I bet you still think about some of those kids from 23 years ago. They still matter to you, right? And they know that. They know that still. None of us humans forget about the people who really poured into us and loved us. We don't forget those people. And that's what you guys get to give all of these kids. And it truly makes a big difference. Another component to attachment that you all are dealing with these children, or that these children are dealing with, that you're trying to help with them with, is the fact that they have parental visits, right? Going and visiting their parents at a CPS office, various things like that, depending on where they are in their case, right? Do any of your clients still have visits with their parents? Is that something you guys deal with? What do you notice? How do they act usually after a visit with their parents?
Not good.
Not good, right? It's usually fixed. It's usually quite ugly for 24 hours, to be frank, right? Why? That's a good question, right? A lot of people, the foster families, we're all calling, why are they acting so crazy after these visits? Can we stop these visits, right? So I want you guys to think, again, it all stems on attachment, okay? So I want you to put yourself in these kids' eyes and feelings and what they have to go through with these visits, okay? So I want you to just kind of stop and think for a second. Who is somebody that you love that is so important in your life? Somebody you talk to on a consistent basis, okay? A spouse, a parent, a sister, a brother, somebody who's very important to you, who's been in your life for a while, okay? Now imagine if they died in a car accident today. Sudden, they're just gone. You didn't get to say your goodbyes, they're just gone, okay? Terrible thing to think about, right? But now imagine then over the next, couple days, week here, you're planning the funeral, you're going through and you're talking to friends and family, and you're starting to realize, like, I'm not going to be living life with this person anymore. And you're just beginning to even grapple with that idea. And the night after their funeral, you're sitting there in your room and it's quiet. And all of a sudden that person is there. Physically, not a ghost, but is physically there and can comfort you like nobody else has ever comforted you. Can hold you, can soothe you, can sing your song, whatever it is that helps you. And then an hour later, they're gone unexplainably. You'd be a wreck, right? You'd be an utter wreck. Where were they? Why did they come? How did this happen? What is going on in my world, right? And you would be right there to the point when you found out they died, right? Emotionally, physically, everything. You would be sick. Fair? Then, okay, life goes on. Another 2 weeks go by. You're finally maybe running out of all the food that people have brought you. You're trying to go to the grocery store. You're trying to kind of maybe get back into work, start thinking about life, has to move on. And then all of a sudden that person is there again, physically there to comfort you and soothe you and love you the way that only they can. And they're there. I mean, you can touch them. They're there. Doesn't make any sense, but you don't care because you're just so glad to see them. And then after an hour, they're gone again, completely gone. Okay? You'd be a wreck. You're right back to the point when they died, right? Are they going to come again? I don't know. When are they going to come again? How are they doing this? What is going on? You couldn't function. You couldn't move on. You would be looking for them around every corner. Everybody would think you are crazy and losing your mind. And there was no way you could function. You would be looking for them. And imagine this goes on for months, every 2 weeks. Randomly you see them. Randomly they're there. Now, the reason we do these family visits, that's what these kids are going through. They're seeing the parents about every 2 weeks. Okay? Now, what they're experiencing, what you guys would be experiencing in that scenario, is that attachment to that person. And every time it would be like losing them all over again because they're physically there to comfort you. No matter how good or bad they are at comforting you, there's still a comfort just being there. It's familiar, right? And so to go through that and to live in that is terrible, but necessary because it keeps that bond of attachment there, right? You wouldn't be able to grieve the loss of that person because you're expecting them to show up again, right? If these kids are going to go back home, we have to keep that bond of attachment, whatever it was, and we try to strengthen it. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So we have to keep these kids in this cycle until we know that they're not going to go home. But how long could you live like that? So this can't go on that long. We all know that. It would drive you crazy. And it's driving these kids crazy. It doesn't matter if you mark on a calendar. There are lots of things you can do to help them understand the visits, but you can't promise mom's going to be there, so you don't always want to do that. There's so many complexities with that. The best thing that we can do to help these kids through that terrible state of keeping them in that perpetual grief is just love them. And when they fall apart, don't get angry at them. Expect it, because you would fall apart too, right? So they're going to go through that terrible after the visit. It's going to be terrible. And there's nothing we can do about that except love them. Don't plan activities that night. Don't then try to take them to soccer practice. Don't try to, maybe they don't go to school the next day. Whatever they need to get through that. Okay, just understand that you wouldn't be able to pull it together either. Okay, and if that means they just need to go home and cry it out or scream or whatever, then that's what they need to do. Right? But I think it's important to really understand that those visits are incredibly hard, no matter what the relationship was before they came into care. Okay. And even then, if they've been in care a long time and they've been doing visits for a long time, it's also understandable for them to see that person and just be angry at seeing that person and knowing you're just going to leave again. Right? Knowing, if I had been going through these visits with my spouse for 3 months, 4 months, I'd start to get to a point where I'd be angry, like, why are you only here for an hour? What is going on? I need more than this. This isn't okay. And that's a valid feeling, right? And so they can get to the point where they push them away. No, I don't even want a hug from you because it's going to go away again. And all of that. And that's just them struggling with this attachment with that person. Does that make sense? And so it's really painful and it's really hard, but it's very necessary if they're going to go back home to that person to maintain that relationship with them. Fair?
I have a question.
Yeah.
My girl, both her parents are out of her life and won't be part of her life.
Okay.
Her two siblings were adopted by an aunt and uncle.
Okay. How old is she?
She is 13.
Okay.
And the aunt and uncle won't allow visits, so they don't see her. She doesn't see them. I have contact with the aunt and uncle, and I'll get pictures every once in a while. But it's the same thing when I share these pictures. It's just, trauma. But I feel like I need to keep. I don't know.
Are the siblings younger?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it hurts to see those pictures because it's a sense of rejection. Is that fair?
Yeah.
She wasn't wanted.
She was rejected.
She was rejected.
She was there.
And that hurts.
Going to be adopted, sent away.
Plus,
there again, sent away.
Plus, also consider the fact that those younger siblings were probably her kids.
Yes.
Okay, so she cares immensely about them, and she wants to know how they're doing. But she also wants that relationship with them. But yet it's also, they didn't want me. What's wrong with me? So there isn't an ounce of not hurt in that.
Mm-mm.
Fair. But yeah, ideally, we'd love for them to be able to have visits. Is she,
But should I keep showing her the pictures?
if she wants to see them, ask her.
Okay.
Give her the choice.
Okay.
You know, when we have the choice of whether or not we want to endure an element of pain,
Mm-hmm.
we have more control over that. And just let her know that you have them, and she can ask for them at any point in time. Maybe always bring when you're with her, bring them with you. And if she doesn't want to see them this time, just let her know next time I come, I'll have them. If you want to see them, they're here.
Okay.
And they're doing okay.
Yes.
She needs to hear that you're
They're
doing
doing okay. Yes.
right? Because she took care of them. Probably.
She did.
To some degree.
Okay.
Yeah, but I love questions. Any other questions about attachment or about how this really plays out with you guys or with these kids, or about these visits, and things of that nature? Anyone online talking?
Not yet.
Okay, no worries. Just feel free to drop any questions or about all of that. But attachment is a very, significant thing. A lot of mental illness in adulthood comes and stems out of not being able to get out of your own head, right? The only way we can have empathy or concern for another human being is by feeling loved ourselves first, especially in childhood. Doesn't mean they can't learn to attach to people and overcome these things as adults. Of course you can, but it's gonna take work and effort and a desire to do so. And again, if you've never felt loved, you don't even realize it's a thing, right? And so you don't desire a chocolate chip cookie unless you've had one and you know how good they are, right? And so they don't desire that relationship unless they've felt that relationship before. And a lot of relationships that these individuals have felt are painful. And so we all like to avoid painful things, right? But again, remember that failure to bear baby. This is an essential element for all of humanity. And so we have to help push them through that by just loving them. And most of the time, the thing they need to know more than anything, and a lot of things that they'll do with their foster families or eventually adoptive families, is they have to know, if I'm the worst version of myself, are you still going to be there? And how do they figure that out? By being the worst versions of themselves. It's much easier for me to push you away than it is for you to love me and leave me. And they need to know, at what point in time are you going to leave? And so it's going to get, and let's be honest, all of us are real good at pushing people's buttons when we know what those buttons are. These kids are brilliant at it. And so when they get to a foster home where they feel safe and they feel secure and they get through that honeymoon period where they're trying to please, and it starts to feel safe, it starts to feel good, and it starts to want that relationship, there's going to be an element of fear and pushback, and they're going to want to see, are you going to stick around? And the only way they're going to know if you're going to stick around is if they're the worst version of themselves that they've ever imagined to be. That doesn't mean they're happy being that way. Doesn't mean they want to be that way. It's the only way they know you're going to stick around. And so just remind your foster families when they start saying, I don't know if I can do this. Remind them, stick in a little bit longer. This is what you're facing. This is what you're at. And you just got to push through. And it's going to get you to your max before you get there. Because they're going to push you to your absolute max. And what does the kid need in that moment? Honestly, they don't even necessarily need a lot of punishment. They need to know you love them, no matter what they do. You don't like their choices, that's fine. But you love them no matter what their choices are, and that you'll be there to walk it out. Right? We all want that. Fair? We all want somebody in life who loves us no matter how much we're mucking it up and will walk it out with us, who will call us out on it, but we'll be there nonetheless. And that's what these kids need more than anything. No matter how ugly they're being, most of the time what they need more than anything, what will be the game changer, is for them to know how much they are loved in the midst of it all. Because they're just hurting and they're just scared. When we look at it from that perspective, the ugly that's happening doesn't look so scary, right? But yeah, those are things that your foster families or adoptive families need to know. And having connection, like you guys being able to bring families together, foster families or adoptive families together to do events and things that y'all do is so critical and so crucial. Because, you know, when these foster families or adoptive families go into the community and they say, oh my gosh, my kid's doing all of this, like, what do I do? The natural response is punish, 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 right? And there's merit, there's truth in that. But at the same time, this is a different walk. These kids need to know you're going to be there through the worst of it. And so they have to be the worst themselves. And they need to know that that's normal in this situation and that other people have gone through it and have survived those moments and pushed through and what that looks like on the other side. You know, and so having that community where parents can talk through that stuff, but even the cooler thing, having a community where the kids can talk through that with each other. They don't feel so isolated. They hear these stories about their terrible families growing up or back home before coming into foster care, or what their foster family is like, or what all of this is like, going to visits and court and all of this. But having somebody else who they can relate to through it also helps with that attachment, with caring about other people, out of their own head, all of those kinds of things. Does that make sense? So it is a critical thing that you guys are doing, and I applaud you for all that you're doing with that. It makes a huge difference. Any other questions with any of that? Nobody online, right? Okay. So then the next thing I want to talk about is autism. What do you guys know about autism?
I may have misspoke. We do have somebody that just came through.
Okay, great.
So we have somebody, Laura Jean, who says that 5 months ago, 5 month old that cries during all visits only with mom. Does not occur with CPS worker, CASA, or foster mom. Is that attachment, or could it be the infant picking up on mom's non-attachment?
All of the above. At 5 months old, they probably still recognize mom, especially if they've been doing visits. So that's still there for sure. But it could also be mom's anxiety. That's a stressful situation. You know, have you ever held a baby and you're anxious yourself? It portrays to that child. So that's hard too, especially a mom who's maybe not good at that anyway. So she may be stressed, which is stressing the baby, plus on top of that attachment, plus on top of that ill attachment, feeling like you don't matter. Can be all of the above. Still necessary though, if she's going to go home. Right? So how do you help with that? Try to get the case wrapped up. You know, maybe even work with the CPS worker on ways to help mom learn to soothe and let mom know, you know, in those visits, that's not a time where we're judging whether she's a good mom or not, that this is just simply a safe place, and reassuring that mom that this is a safe place for her to just have time with her kid. Maybe even just saying those things can help the mom calm down. But yeah, I mean, I'd say that there's definitely an element of attachment in all of that. But it's hard. I've been there. I've been there with that baby. And but remember, again, a newborn baby can tell mom from not mom. Whether they can express it or not is a little different. But they have grieved the loss of that mom. Maybe something familiar, that heartbeat, they're still going to recognize different, her voice is going to be familiar. And then why is she gone? And then, so that baby is still going through that grief cycle, and still experiencing what we were talking about with losing your spouse or loved one, but it just doesn't have any form to rationalize any of it, right? Other than, this is a bad thing to do. Why are we doing this? I don't like this. That's all the baby can say, right? Any other questions?
No, not so far, but I will let you know for sure.
Feel free to chime in, people. And this is just my perspective, my initial reaction on it, but that's what I would say about it. But okay, so autism. What do you guys know about autism? Not a lot, a little bit, nothing. Heard it before. It's a familiar word. Don't really know what it is. Okay, so we're going to show a little video, if you don't mind, that does a really good job. It's just a 4-minute video about describing autism. Now, it is kind of a kiddie video, but it's fun to watch. And they do a great job of really explaining the autism perspective. It's just a 4-minute little video, so I'll let him pull that up here for you guys. Probably could have done it for you, but I would have mucked it up.
That is okay.
Put it all up.
That one day I didn't wear my glasses. Okay. The volume's okay.
We have to share audio too. Yeah, online you have to share the audio.
What's up, everybody?
Oh, you're great. So why are you figuring that out? How long have you been with CASA?
I'm one of the supervisors. I've been here for 3 years.
So wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you.
We volunteered at Elijah's retreat, me and my son. I would say about 4 years ago, we helped paint the fence for his volunteer hours. It's beautiful out there. I'm so beautiful.
You got it's changed a lot.
It has. Oh, wow.
Yeah. For sure. We're gonna wrap this up here at the end and tell you guys this, but we do have a fall festival November 12th out at Elijah's retreat. It's open to everybody, but it could be a fun opportunity for your families to come out and just have fun together as a family. We always want to support your families with that. Here,
We got to figure it out now.
okay, here's autism.
We are all different, and that's wonderful. Some differences are easy to see. Height,
Two.
hairstyle, gender, eye color, and so on. Other differences can't be seen. Our favorite foods, or special skills.
Can't hear it.
Interestingly, the way we see the world is also different. For instance, what do you see in this drawing? Most people see a duck, but some of you might have seen a rabbit. Whichever you saw, you are correct. This is just a trick drawing to show you that all brains work differently. The brain is your body's computer. It works differently for all of us and controls how you learn. That's why we are all good at different things. How you feel, which is why we all feel different emotions. And how you communicate. Sometimes the brain is connected in such a way it affects the senses and how we perceive and read situations and interactions. This is known as autism. Many people have autism, so it's likely you already know someone who is autistic. And for this reason, it's useful to know a little bit about autism. The special wiring inside an autistic brain can sometimes make the person good at tasks we may find difficult, such as mathematics, drawing, or music. It can also do the opposite, and activities we find too easy are incredibly difficult to them, such as making friends. The senses constantly send information to your brain about your surroundings and other people. However, when a person's brain and its senses don't communicate well, the brain can become overwhelmed and confused, affecting how they see the world. Picture yourself walking down the street. This is how an autistic brain may experience the same world. Scary, isn't it? Sadly, in many cases, the person can't say out loud how they feel. So even though there's chaos going on in their heads, they seem okay on the outside, unable to ask for help. We will develop behaviors to help us feel calm in uncomfortable situations. We may look away, hug ourselves, chew our fingernails, fidget, bite our lips, and so on. Equally, autistic people develop behaviors that help them cope with these intense moments. These actions may seem unusual, but they're just their way to feel calm. When they happen, it means they are having a hard time. The kind thing to do is not to give them an even harder time by getting cross, ignoring them, or mocking them. People with autism need friends who are willing to take the time to. With good communication and plenty of patience, everyone would be better off. People with autism are not ill or broken. They simply have a unique view of the world. And with a little support from their friends, they might just be able to share that view with us. Autism can make amazing things happen.
There's just a little video, but the cool thing with autism is that these individuals with autism
I've been using Grammarly for years.
Have a very unique perspective. Okay, so autism, is defined as a developmental disorder of variable severity, right? So you have that big spectrum that is characterized by difficulty in social interaction.
Sorry.
No, you're good. And communication, and by restricted or repetitive patterns of thought and behavior. Okay, what does that mean? That's a lot of words. So autism, let's just go back to an element of autism. There's a lot to talk about, but all the individuals on this spectrum, okay, are dealing with sensory input in a very different way than we or I are, okay? So have you ever stayed at a hotel before or someone else's house and all of a sudden you're paying attention to noises that you don't pay attention to in your own home? Right? Like you hear the refrigerator kick on or the AC kick on or the heater, or there's just different noises that you're not used to, right? Well, I know for me, when I was a kid, we stayed out at a big lodge out in the mountains, and man, did I hear those loud animal noises outside because I was scared of them, right? I paid attention to them. So we have this ability when we receive input, our clothes, touch, smell, hearing, visual, seeing, tasting, we categorize everything. And we all, from infancy on, categorize things as, is this a threat to us? Is this a life or flight event? Okay, are we in danger? Or is this normal and unimportant? Something we have to pay attention to. Like in your own house, when the AC kicks on and off, you don't pay attention to it. Unless you're worried about how much your electrical bill will be. Then you pay attention to it because it's important, right? But there's input that we just ignore, and we choose to subconsciously ignore it, and we pay no attention to it, right? Like, have you ever noticed when you buy a new car, you're like, oh my gosh, there's all these cars all over the place. A whole bunch of I started to trend. Same amount of cars were there before. We just didn't pay attention to it. We filtered it out. It was unimportant input, right? So that's how our brains deal with the array of input we're getting on all of our senses all the time, right? Individuals with autism filter all of the sensory input they're receiving in a very different way. They don't have that ability to categorize things as unimportant, not scary, or important. They receive all input from all five senses all the time. All the time. They never are able to ignore any element of sensory input. Okay? So their clothes, they're always paying attention to them. Their shoes, they're always paying attention to them. Their socks, not just when they're uncomfortable, not when they're too tight, but all the time. They're paying attention to the lights. They actually, a lot of the kids will even see an array of light that we don't see because we have subconsciously filtered it out and we just see light. And so there's a lot of lights that actually blink at a very fast rate that we don't see it because we choose not to pay attention to it. They can't not pay attention to it. Okay. Then they hear all these things, I don't know if you heard the car there. Like, I know that there's a rooster at my house. I don't pay attention to that rooster. He's just my background noise, but they hear it every time. They can't tune that stuff out. Okay. So imagine life is very different. So like in that video, you saw that young lady walking down the street, right? She's paying attention to all of it, plus throw in smells. Okay. And then how that tastes in your mouth too. Right. And so that's a very different world to live in. Fair? So going to the grocery store, somewhere where there's a lot of people and there's an intercom and there's other kids screaming and there's smells and there's all of this, is a very overwhelming sensory experience, right? And the only way you're going to be able to deal with that is by learning to deal with all of that experience, right? So we talk about how as babies, we take in all of this sensory input and we go, this is too much, and we filter out, this is unimportant, we don't need to pay attention to that, that's scary, pay attention to that, this is normal, but pay attention to it, it's important because it's mom. We categorize these things. Individuals with autism have no ability to categorize and ignore it, so what they do to survive as a coping mechanism is they focus in on one thing, right? If we're all focusing on one thing, we're ignoring input from us, right? Have you ever gotten into a good book where you really focus on it and you kind of ignore everything else? That's the skill set that they have to be able to cope, okay? And so with that, then that looks odd. Can be an immense strength though as well, right? But so you're going to see kids in a grocery store, they're trying not to pay attention to anything. And the mom's saying to them, hey, focus, look where you're going. And she's like, well, do you want me to focus or do you want me to survive? You'll notice a lot of autistic kids too. You'll say, hey, when you're trying to talk to them, we're looking for what? That they're paying attention to us. So what do we look for when we ask people to talk to us? Yeah. Right? Like I'm engaging your guys' eye contact this whole time. Sorry, I'm lying. I can't see your eye contact. But I want to make sure you're getting it, or if you're confused, I want to help, right? And so I'm looking for that visual input back. Okay, an autistic person is saying, okay, if you want me to listen to you, then I have to turn off all other input and pay attention to hearing. So you'll see them, they're like robotic, and the fact that they will turn off. They'll look down. And you say, listen to me. And they go, that's actually them listening to you. But what do we demand? No, listen to me and look at me. Okay, well, if you want me to look at you, I'm going to look at your hair, I'm going to look at your shirt, I'm going to look at your shoes, and your shoes untied, and I'm no longer hearing what you're saying, right? And so we need that visual input. They don't, and they can't do both well. It's overwhelming. Right? And so does that mean that they can't learn how to do eye contact? They can with great repetition, but it's never important to them. It's only important to you. So depending on what they're doing with their life, maybe it is something you teach. There can be value to that, to how to have social skills. But remember, if you want them to listen and if it's really important, allow them to turn that off so they can hear you, right? So just remember, the way that they filter all of their sensory input that's happening is by focusing on one thing and tuning out the rest. That helps solve a lot of problems in interactions and different things that you work with them on. So just kind of remembering that component to it. Does that make sense? And so then what does it look like when somebody's overwhelmed? How do they calm down? So the other element to this is, so when we're all infants, right, we don't have that ability to internally soothe, right? Like if somebody comes in and starts, I don't know, yelling at us all for something, we're all going to be like, "Ooh, we got to calm down and not react. We have to solve the problem. We have to turn our intellect on. We have to calm ourselves down." We're not good at that as babies, right? Okay. And the baby's crying and overwhelmed. We do what? We pick them up, we swaddle them, we rock, we are adding sensory input. That's calming. That gives them a sense of calm because they haven't figured out all these categories yet. They're not old enough to the ability that they can self-internally soothe. They don't have those abilities yet. So we do that for them. So an autistic individual is never going to be able to internally soothe. Okay. So things like normal toddler age, we start doing things like timeout or activities where they have to just, where we distract and things of that nature, but we also are trying to help them calm down, make good choices, right? Autistic individuals aren't going to be able to do it the same way. It's going to look different to have success. Okay. So so a lot of times, like with my neurotypical, my 5 kiddos, when they were overwhelmed and angry because they heard no for the first time and it's something they really, really wanted, like a chocolate chip cookie, right? They needed to go calm down and get out of their emotions and then start to think about, how do I earn a cookie or something of that nature? How do I get what I want in the right way, right? An autistic individual, instead of calming in a quiet space and internally soothing, they need external input to calm them down. Okay, so that same kid who's autistic, who's wanting that cookie, maybe even didn't have the words to say the cookie, who's throwing the same similar fit about not getting the cookie that they want. If you put that kid on a trampoline, a small little indoor trampoline, and have them bounce, maybe even bounce with them, they're going to calm down. And then you can talk about that cookie. Now you put my kid, who's neurotypical, on that trampoline and we're jumping together. Now it's a whole other game and everything's getting worse and it's screaming and you're going to amplify the situation. It's not going to calm it down, right? Because what they have to learn is to internally soothe. An autistic individual will never have the ability, no matter how old they are, to internally soothe. So that means they have to learn a different way to cope. Is that fair? Doesn't mean they can't cope. Just means they need to do it in a different way than you or I. So typical parenting, the techniques we usually use don't work because you're trying to get a kid to do something they're never going to be able to do. Fair? And so we have to give them appropriate sensory input externally to help them calm down. So what that looks like with a lot of kids, there's three things that work with a lot of kids. One of them will work, and it's the 3 S's. Okay? One is swinging, motion. No matter where you are, if you're at a festival or you're at the grocery store or you're at home, especially when they're little, you can teach them that just by picking them up and swinging them, that physical motion completely calms their system. Okay? Another one, so swinging, the 3 S's, swinging. Another one is spinning. So sometimes you'll see autistic people spinning and they'll just be spinning in the store. Okay? Again, you can pick them up when they're screaming and throwing a fit and you can spin with them. And it's weird. It's like a switch. It just all of a sudden starts calming them down. The other S is a squeeze. Now, not just a hug, but I mean a squeeze. I don't mean hurting. I don't mean angry. I mean a solid compression that's consistent. And you'll feel, if it's effective for them, they'll just melt. And so giving them that sensory input helps them learn there's an end to the chaos in my brain where they're overwhelmed and they can calm down and then they can start to ask for those things. Okay? Just the same as your kiddo who is, really wants something and gets overwhelmed and gets, out of control with it. They want to get it back into control, right? Same with an autistic kid who's at the store, who's overwhelmed. He has to get back in control. And so you can give them external sensory input to do that. Now, what does that look like then for life, right? Does that mean that these individuals are always going to have to spin in order to calm down no matter what they're doing? No. They can also find things. Once they learn there's a solution, right, that we can calm down, then we can find things that are more appropriate within society. So you can have things, some teenagers will go to school with things in their pocket, walking around with their hands in your pocket, maybe somewhat weird, but usually not. And they can get that sensory input from something in their pocket that has a whole bunch of different textures on it. Having time when you just pull away from the group and just calm things down by listening to music, or again, touching, like a fabric or a ball that has a whole bunch of different pegs on it, things of that nature can help and can be totally normal within adulthood even still. But they are always going to externally soothe. And so the trick is to teach them that there is a solution, they can calm down, and here are some tools to do it with, and finding those things. And as they grow, trying to make those things a bit more, quote unquote, normal there, but they don't stand out as much.
So on the spectrum.
Yeah, it's a giant spectrum. I'm just talking about all of these people on the spectrum are experiencing this. Some of them are just better at it than others, but there's also an element of intellect involved in that spectrum that changes how this plays out. Is that fair?
What does that mean? So if they're more intellectual, they're not as high on the spectrum, or?
Well, right. So we refer, so there's a spectrum of autism, right? And so we do, there used to be where we would diagnose somebody as Asperger's. Mm-hmm. We're not doing that as much anymore if they say they're high functioning autism.
Okay.
So there's high functioning, meaning that you are functioning within a high amount of society. Okay. They're more quote unquote normal, I guess, to some degree, versus those who have a lot more dramatic symptoms of autism. Right. And so there is, you have your high functioning autistic kids are actually, a lot of them are very, 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 very brilliant. Okay. Because again, they have this skill that they've tuned in from when they were an infant, that the way I function and survive in the chaos of all of this sensory input is to zero in on something because there's calm in that, right? So they're very good at learning everything there is to know about something. And they love that. They love learning all there is to know about something. And if any one of us sit down and learn all there is to know about trains and how they function and all the maps and all of that, we'd be pretty phenomenal at that, right? And if we sit down and learn everything there is to know about mathematics, we'd be a savant and we'd be amazing at that, right? Or coding or any of that. And so they bring these gifts because they are so good at focusing on something and following it all the way through that they can change the world in a lot of ways. But that's your high functioning kiddos. On the opposite extreme of that, you have kids who are nonverbal. Okay. So then what is that about? Right. And so does that mean that they're not there? No, not that at all. I don't know if you've ever heard of Temple Grandin, but she's an adult with autism. She's 74 and she's had a birthday. But she is, she has a PhD and she revolutionized the cattle industry, but she didn't talk till she was 7 or 8 years old. And she describes her brain and the brain of a lot of autistic individuals as the cloud in the sky. It is taking in information all of the time, right? Again, I've already talked about their sensory input. They're taking it all in all the time. But with autism, a lot of the individuals were only accessing that information in the cloud in their brain through 1 bar of data out in the country. So it's not a problem of intellect or them taking it all in. It's a problem of output. Does that make sense? And so the talking component is sometimes very, very delayed. Sometimes there's ways to overcome that, but there's a lot of adults who are nonverbal who you give them a keyboard and you teach them how to type and they have a voice. So it's not that that intellect isn't there, it's that the access point to that information is where the problem lies. And so that looks different. But you know, when somebody can't communicate that with us, we don't think they're very smart, right? And when they don't act the way we normally do, they act differently, we think there's a problem. And it's not that there isn't a problem, but that problem may be a solution to other things. Fair? You know, one of the biggest things that we can do when there is a problem out there in society or in the world is to pull back, change the perspective, and look at it through new eyes. And that's what these guys, these individuals with autism, have a whole different perspective on everything from us. And so with that, they bring a lot of really cool solutions and have, over the course of time, a lot of probably very autistic individuals brought a lot of advances in technology to us.
I think it's very interesting because it's individuals that suffered growing up with some problem, and then they find solutions and present them to the next generation. I follow Finding Cooper's Voice on social media, and it's a young man with autism who was nonverbal for a while, and he has an iPad system now that he uses to communicate, and just watching him grow as an individual and his relationship with his younger sibling, because he expresses himself differently, and his relationship with his younger sibling to grow and develop, and how he's found his voice is really awesome. Do recommend.
Yeah, I follow them too. It's a great family who do great things, and they're willing to be transparent about their journey. And how cool is that? You know, we all like to be picture perfect on Facebook or whatever, but they're not trying to be that. They're trying to say, hey, here's my walk. I hope you can relate and or at least appreciate the journey, and maybe it will help you with yours. And that's cool. And it is. And that goes right to my next point. Okay, so we talked about autism, we talked about attachment. So, okay, now you've got this autistic individual who you can't tap into that cloud very easily, right? They don't make eye contact if they're trying to listen to you. How do we attach? That's difficult, right? And then put on top of that, and so if you don't have that attachment, yet again, then these individuals are already trying to survive their sensory input overload by zeroing in and focusing on one thing, so they tune you out quite a bit, right? Just as a survival mechanism. So how do you tap into that world? And how do you pull them back into your world? And that's the trick. And so sometimes it's giving them a voice, giving them a tablet so they can actually start to interact, right? Sometimes it's finding a common thing that they like, that they're interested in. Sometimes it's getting really close to their face because they're so focused here because the world out there is so big. So if you're communicating from this distance, you know, they're tuning you out. But if you get real close to them, then all of a sudden there you are. You're there. You're in their little tiny world that they can handle. Does that make sense? And it is very different for each of the individuals. And so attachment is hard, let alone now you've got families who they're afraid to go to the grocery store with their kid because they're having giant meltdowns because they're overwhelmed. They can't do the normal things that normal kids do because it's completely overwhelming to them. So then they isolate themselves. They've got a kid who's not learning how to deal with all of this input. And it's just this terrible cycle that continues. And so attachment is difficult for families with autism because the kid isn't seeking that from you. Doesn't mean they don't need it. Again, we've got that infant who failure to thrive, still a need for them, just harder for them to feel safety, right? So again, attachment can't happen when somebody's in life or flight, right? So we go back to our trauma kids who are coming into foster adoption. When they're scared that a real life monster is going to come get them because they have, or that you're going to leave, they don't feel safe. They can't attach to you because they're just surviving. We have a lot of individuals with autism who are just trying to survive the sensory input in their own brain. Okay. And so until we can give them mechanisms to feel calm, we can't attach. So attachment usually is starting right with babies. We got when they're when you start playing peekaboo and that kind of came. That's when attachment's beginning. And so not that attachment doesn't start earlier than that, but it's when you really start to see that they can isolate the difference and all of that. The brain's working all that out. And so with individuals with autism, it's much later in life. It's much more like 5-6 years of age or older, depending on how they're dealing with all the sensory input. Okay, we can't attach to another human being if we're in fight or flight because we're just surviving mode. So it's a trick of getting out of survival mode and then attaching and having fun in a way that they can, right? So I know it's already 1. What time do I need to stop talking? Because I could go for hours. No, I'm not going to. Interesting.
Just whatever.
Like 5-10 minutes, or is that too much?
That's fine. Yeah,
are you sure?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. So with that, so Elijah's Retreat, what we do at Elijah's Retreat is it's a 50-acre dude ranch, so to speak, but the whole family gets to come out there and gets to be themselves, right? So again, to go back to that fight or flight, if mom is in fight or flight, right? If mom's scared my kid is going to have a meltdown any moment, what are they doing? They're placating, trying to prevent the meltdown. They're trying to survive. They're not attaching. They're not being nurturing. They're not being loving. They're not being somebody you want to attach to. They're trying to decode the bomb from going off. Okay? That's very different. So you have to give families a space that they can just be themselves. And if they have a fit, who cares? Somewhere where they're understood. Okay. And so this is just moms with their kids who were born from them, right? Now you guys are going to add a whole nother component to that capacity when you have autism kids in CASA. Okay. And we'll get there if I can get there quickly. But so with Elijah's Retreat, we have spaces. So it's a whole 50 acres. When families come, the first time that they come, mommies are usually explaining to me there's, if you keep going down, that there's something, they'll say, oh, I'm sorry, my kid's doing that. Or, oh, I'm sorry, he's autistic. And I'm like, I know he's autistic. It's okay. You don't have to explain your kid to me. I want you to the whole time you're here, I want you to let the kid explore the way they want to explore. I want you to let them play the way they want to play. And if they have a fit, we're here to help. There's not going to be any judgment. We pick them up in the morning and we go through a ranch hand experience. Sorry, you're looking at me. I'm looking at I just thought of it. We had a ranch hand experience where we pick them up with a hayride. And we go around and all of the families, all 4 families gather together on our hayride, okay, which is really hard sometimes for autistic kids. So some of them walk behind, but we bring them all together purposefully. You know, the moms, autistic kids get to meet other autistic kids, whatever that looks like. And we go around and we hand feed all of our animals. Because a hand feed, so that's very sensory yet again. It's also a lot of pressure trying to do new things. But we're doing it as a whole family. So moms are doing it with kids. We're having fun together without the pressure of interaction, right? So one of the ways we can develop attachment is by doing new things together and having a positive experience with them, right? And so you can utilize that within CASA with all kinds of different things. But another thing we do right after our ranch adventure is all of them kids do horseback riding. And we do teach what equine therapy is. We let the autistic kids do a little bit of equine therapy. I help evaluate if we think this would be a good resource for them or not. Because again, on the spectrum, it's good for some kids, but not all kids. But the siblings get to play the same game. They get to be competitive at a similar level. We make it competitive for them. So they're interacting like normal siblings would interact, which is something they don't normally get to do. Does that make sense? Again, positive interactions, working together without that forced contact, doing new things together. Plus, they're actually learning a lot of things. We're doing right over left, we're doing core building, we're doing all of that kind of fun stuff with the autistic kids as well. And then teaching the parents about it. Now we also have added a bigger horse for the parents get to ride with the kids and give kids high fives and all of that fun stuff. But then they also have a playground area that's all fenced in. The animals come right up to it. The kids can't get off the playground at the main gate. And so the kid can run, can explore, can play on the piano and keyboard and drum set. It's not going to bother anybody. Can dig in the sand, can play with the animals across the fence. And all of the siblings can just have fun and the mom can relax and have fun with them. And there's no, if there's a fit over the swing or whatever, nobody cares. Everybody expects me. There's also outdoor hiking. We have bicycles for all different disabilities. Then you get to your own bonfire pit, all of that kind of fun stuff as well. We have a barrel train that the families get to drive around, which again, fun, sensory input. All the siblings get to ride together. The parents get to drive. It's a new experience, and they can do it for hours because it's calming for the autistic kid. So they get that sense of survival. They're okay. They're calm, and yet they're having fun. All together. So all of our activities are based in the family. We also have an activity barn with basketball, ping pong, foosball, all of that. And right next to it is a sensory room that the kid who's autistic can go in and out of that sensory room and gain that sensory input to calm themselves down and then re-engage, where the siblings can go into that quiet space with them, where the parents can and play and have fun together and try new sensory input and figure out what works for them and what doesn't. There's also a sensory garden. Eating food is also very sensory, right? So they get to pick fruit and vegetables right out of the garden and eat it, smell it. Herbs are really fun, very textural, very sensory. They get to participate in all of that kind of fun stuff out of Elijah's retreat. We also have, and so these are the cabins that the families get to come and stay at. We have 4 cabins currently. We only charge the families $55 a night to come and stay out there. But the cabins are all set up for them. So there's locks on the doors, so for the runners and things like that. It's 2-bedroom cabins with a full kitchen, washer, dryer. It's a kid's room with 4 twin beds and bunk beds, toys, jumping, trampolines, all the sensory things that they would need in the cabin as well. And then a queen size bed in the parents' room. But yeah, and then we also have an internship program for youth with autism. So again, youth who are 16 and older get to come out there and have their first job experience, where they get to actually be challenged in doing new things in a way that is comfortable for them. And we try to work with them. Texas Workforce Solutions pays them to come out and work there and provides job coaching for them to kind of overcome all of the obstacles for employment. And we do lots of practicing interviewing, filling out applications, all the hurdles that are going to be difficult for them in transitioning into employment and things like that. But so attachment and autism are very difficult. So for you guys, with CASA, if you have individuals you may have come into care who maybe aren't even diagnosed, right? And so the things to be looking out for that sensory input, but then also be looking at attaching is going to be even more difficult for those foster homes and adoptive homes. And you really want to help support them with that and help advocate that, hey, this is going to be an issue. You may want to be doing play therapy or different things to help deal with this, to get into their world. And what I really found, like with horseback riding, when I get into that space and I can make that kid smile about something with horseback riding, whether it's my singing, which I'm not beautiful with singing, but it's silly singing, and I can catch their attention, then I can pull them into my world, and then I can go back into their world, and I can pull them back out. And the more we do that, the more they realize interacting with you and that attachment is a good thing. But again, so attachment, we know, is very vital, but if we don't ever feel it, if we've never eaten that chocolate chip cookie, we don't know that it's good. So if we never feel that attachment from somebody else and really have that positive interaction, then we don't ever gravitate to it. So these autistic kids who are just surviving sensory input and focused here, we got to enter into their world. So they realize that there's something positive about that. Then we can pull them out into our world and get them to start interacting more and engaging more with us because they want it. But they don't know they even want it if they never experienced it. Does that make sense? What questions do you guys have?
Where is it located?
We're just south of Jacksonville, so we're about 40 minutes from here.
Okay.
And we are always looking for volunteers, not that I'm going to steal your volunteers.
We can share.
But we do have a fun fall festival November 12th, and it's open to the public. It's the one day of the year that we're open to all. And it's from 11 to 4. We've got great barbecue and funnel cakes and fun food. We've got lots of games, and we also have we have 2 main areas that everybody who is overwhelmed, be that being a foster kid at a festival, is also very overwhelming because they're still living in that fight or flight. There's the barn that I talked about with the sensory room. And then we also have a huge jumping pillow on either sides of the festival that are pulled away enough that they can pull away and have fun at those and calm down and then re-engage into the festival. It's also all fenced in. So any runners, we're going to locate real quickly. They can't get off the property, things like that. So it's a safe festival for individuals with those kind of components. But any other questions you guys have about autism or?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of our far spectrum kids that will become quite obsessive with
anything,
many things.
Yeah.
Or, like they, for example, they have to eat with this plate, this cup, this fork every meal. Or they have to use this sheet, this one sheet, this one blanket must go everywhere with them. It's very difficult from our perspective to get our foster families, or really our kidship families, to understand, because we assume this is what they've put in place to cope.
100%.
Right, with those situations.
Mm-hmm.
And our families aren't accustomed to
having to live that rigid of a lifestyle.
Yes, rigid.
Very rigid.
It can be very, very difficult. What can we do to help them with understanding these coping mechanisms are for the kid, that this is what they've developed?
Yeah, 100%. One, I would let them know this isn't forever. Right? We all need to know that something that's difficult isn't forever. So the rigid lifestyle that they have to live in the moment to help the kids feel safe isn't something they're going to have to do forever. Okay. The other thing is maybe even I can share that video with you.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 4-minute little video, but remind them that the kid is currently living on that street with all of that chaos around them. Okay. Like if they put themselves in the midst of a tornado, where are you trying to go? In the midst of a tornado, you want it to be safe. You're curled up in a ball with whatever flashlight, phone you feel safe with. And you're going to stay there until the storm's over. And that's what these kids are dealing with. That's what they're living in. That's their life. even though it doesn't look like that on the outside. And that's the biggest component to that. So I think it just teaching about autism, teaching about sensory stuff. And then, if you can take away some of the new sensory stuff that they're dealing with by giving them the same plate, the same sheet, and that's immense comforting to them. If you can just give them that, even though it means nothing to any of us, it means everything to them, then that's a little thing that we can accommodate for now. It's not forever.
Right.
But I think it's a matter of changing their perspective of what and trying to help them understand the perspective of the kid, right? And knowing this rigidity, they're always going to want routine because there's safety in routine. They can come to expect it because everything's overwhelming all the time for them from a sensory perspective. So to have something that they can predict is helpful, but nobody lives in a total routine. So the other thing would be to know that if for some reason you're not going to be able to have that sheet, or you're going somewhere to eat and you're not going to have that plate or that spoon, let them know about it ahead of time. Give them the chance to wrap their mind around it. And that's what I just say. I just wrap your mind around it. This is what we're going to be doing. When we go to this restaurant, I'm not going to have that plate and spoon, but we're going to have the spaghetti you like. And then say, and we're going to have to deal with it. And it's not going to be pretty. And that's okay. But the more you do that, the more they'll be okay with it. But again, all this has to stem from first just being safe. And the kids that you're dealing with initially in these placements aren't safe in any capacity. They're real life monsters and they're real life overwhelmed, right? So any component of safety that we can give them is critical.
So we shouldn't advise them to the caregivers, just suck it up and take the plate to the restaurant.
You can suck it up, take the plate for the first 3 months.
Right.
Definitely. Suck it up, take the plate. If they're going to be there for a long time with you, maybe we need to start dealing with the plate.
We never know that.
I know. And so that's the element. So safety is critical first. Nothing can happen beyond feeling safe. So I would always go back to it at that. If this is a safety element and we don't know how long they're going to be there, let them just be safe. That's not the time to fight that battle. Fair?
Right.
But it's hard. I know. It's hard to live like that. It is. What other questions does anybody have? Does anyone have questions online?
Not at the moment.
Okay.
I have a question. Is it true that there are now more autistic kids, or are we just recognizing what it is?
That is a great point. So, yes, we are definitely recognizing more what it is. Let's be honest with that situation. So there is a group of individuals right now that are being diagnosed autistic that are 16 to 25 who are high functioning, because 10, 12 years ago, we wouldn't have diagnosed them as autistic, right? And so then, of course, the numbers grow, right? So there is an element of autism has always been around. Just the sensory, this different way of their brain functioning has been around for a long time. Now, I don't know about you, but I know when I was in school, I didn't know any kids who were autistic, but I definitely knew some kids who were odd and who were really smart. Right? And so there's a lot of families that come out to Elijah Retreat. So we know that there is a genetic component to autism now. There is a genetic component. Now, what triggers those genes? I don't know. What triggers cancer genes? I don't know. There's a lot of components to all of that. But there is a genetic component to it, and it's a large group of chromosomes. And when any one of those chromosomes are affected, it's autism, and that's where the spectrum is how many of those chromosomes are affected. Okay, and so we do know there's a genetic link to it. So there are a lot of parents who bring their autistic kids out who they would probably be diagnosed autistic now if they were children.
The parents would.
Yes, ma'am. And some of them ask me, am I autistic? Like, does it matter? Do you need that diagnosis? Fair? What does that do for you for life? Maybe it helps you understand that perhaps you deal with these sensory things the same way as your child does, and how have you done well with it? Give that to your child, right? But the deal is they have to learn to cope, and so maybe it's a blessing. Some people I feel like are diagnosed to the point that then they also aren't pushed right? If maybe they weren't ever diagnosed, then they would have been pushed more to have to overcome this stuff. And so you have to be careful with that balance, right? So yeah, figure out what it is, understand the perspective, but let's also push, because these kids can do a lot more than what we think they can do. Push to do so. Now the push is ugly. The push is way uglier than it is with any other neurotypical kid. It's hard. It's going to be the hardest thing you've ever done in your entire life. But pushing them and challenging them to overcome new is the greatest thing that you can give them, because then they can do new. If you don't ever overcome new and how scary new is, then you never do anything new. That's very limiting, right? And so that's the hardest thing for these kids. And so we have to do new, and no matter what new looks like, we have to do it. But again, first, for your kids, they have to survive. They have to feel like they're safe. So what you're doing is just giving them any sense of safety and routine and consistency that you can give them, because you can't give them much of that. Fair. But ultimately we want to help push these kids. And so that's the thing that we're doing a lot at Elijah Retreat, is we're showing parents, no, we can't do new things. Most of the time they come and they say, oh, my kid's never going to ride the horse. I'm like, okay, that's great. They don't have to ride the horse. But if they want to ride the horse, I'm going to help them figure out how to overcome it and get up on that horse. And I don't care if it's 2 hours. I don't care if it's 5 minutes of kicking and screaming. Me and the horse are good with this. Let's just go. And they love it. And just learning how to get through those fits and how to overcome the fear of something new. Right?
Wow.
But yeah, what other questions do you guys have?
Really quick, I'm gonna just say some closing statements.
Yes.
No, please don't apologize. This has been. I'm just gonna close it out just so that anybody that needs to head out, they can. But by all means, if anybody wants to stay logged on to Zoom or here in person, we're not rushing anybody out of here, because you were an amazing speaker. So thank you so much for being here. A round of applause. Thank you. So we dropped a link to your website on the Zoom chat. So if you guys want to check that out, or if you have any other questions, you can reach out via that way. Be sure to check out the Fall Festival, which is going to be fantastic. But yes, for those that are here in the room with us, if you could just fill out that survey and then hand it to yours truly before you head out today. For those that are joining us via Zoom, if you could just drop a 1 to 5 rating on how applicable this was to your advocacy, we would really appreciate that. Friendly reminder that we do have that CE opportunity that's going to be in Longview. It's happening right here, which is going to recognizing children at the risk of sex trafficking. That is going to be on November 3rd. I will be sending out an email, so that's going to be an option for you. And we have our next CE on November 30th after Thanksgiving. I will be entering these, in these CE credits for you. But if you do have any outside of this, remember that you need to do that on your own. I'm just giving you that reminder because we're coming up at the end of the year where you need your 12 hours. So again, thank you all so much for joining. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording, but if y'all want to stay on and ask questions, you're more than welcome to. All right, thank you so much.